Okay. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join us in our very first technical workshop. It's a series of workshops that's going to happen this week as we kick off the Polkadot Hackathon North America edition. Joining us today is Emre, who will take you through an introduction to Polkadot, and shortly after, he will be coming on to share with you a little bit more about what he has prepared in terms of content as well. But before I pass the time to Omri, basically it's just a kind of shout out for those who are out there who have yet registered for the hackathon. Do grab your mobile phone and scan the QR code that's out there to participate at the North America edition. Essentially, it's actually the next stop of the Global Series, which Polkadot has been doing since last year. And this is open not just only to folks who are in the North American region, but everyone around the globe is actually welcome to participate at the hackathon essentially as well. Quickly covering, basically, we do have 5 main categories for participations, of which you can build a project for submission during the phase of 6 weeks of hacking that we have starting yesterday on 30th of May. So you're not in any particular order, but I'm just going to briefly bring you through what are the 5 main categories that you can actually build for in terms of this hackathon. First of all, if you are one that really looks at interfaces and experiences, this will be the category which you would like to submit your project for. Essentially, it's really about getting experience in building a wide variety of interfaces and user experience that the chains can actually adopt. Second part will really be ideas or anything that you can build with relation to a DAO or governance, which, Polkadot in itself, it's a one great example in terms of its representations of DAO. Over here, it's really about exploring ideas, including creation of new DAOs and necessary tooling involved in this development process as well, as well as governance mechanisms and palettes that you can kind of work with. The third category, Web3 and tooling, essentially, it's kind of a category that is a coverall based on the other categories that you can't really find where you would like to submit your projects for. But essentially, it's really about looking at all kinds of toolings and application that can be used to expand Web3, building a better web that can explore use cases for open source technologies for a society run on peer-to-peer networks, essentially. The other 2 categories are pretty much straightforward. They are in DeFi and NFTs, which is something that has been talked around town for a while. But the idea here is that, if you have great ideas in terms of what you could implement in the areas of DeFi and NFTs, you can choose to submit your project under this category in itself. So apart from that, in terms of building on Substrate and how you can create an impact in the Polkadot ecosystem, over here at this hackathon specifically, we have also included lots of ecosystem teams that have actually contributed to their to challenges. Basically, their bounties, of which you can take on something that can build onto or integrate with the projects ideas that you have created for the hackathon. And I'm not going to run through each and every one of them, but we do have lots of teams that are involved from Makala, A-Star, Bifrost, Crust Network, Equilibrium, Ice Network, Interlay, Fala Network, Subsquid, RMRK, Robonomics, Unique Network, Zay's Gist, Subsocial, Moonbeam, Subquery. And for the first time ever, we do have 4 ecosystem teams that have kind of collaborated together. Subquery, Moonbeam, Akala, and Hydra DX to kind of provide a bounty that any of you can kind of subsume or integrate into the main categories that you're kind of looking at as well. As of now, we do have a total prize pool of 613,000 up for grabs, splitting between the main category prizes and as well as the ecosystem teams challenges as well. As a brief run through, the category prizes, which is funded by the Polkadot Treasury, we will be awarded an overall winner, which the team will be walking away with 30,000 in prize, Hackathon swag box, and discount for Substrate Runtime Academy. Similarly, each of the category, we would be actually awarding first, second, and third place, each walking away with 20,000, 15,000, and 10,000 respectively. On top of that, we are going to empower everyone in the public to actually cast your vote across all the submissions that has been made after the submission deadline to crown basically the Community Choice Awards, and we will be awarding 3 teams, which they will be walking away with 5,000 each, as well as their crown on community as a Community Choice teams. On top of that, together with the prize pool, individual ecosystem team challenges do have their own individual prizes, which you can find the information about that on the participants guide, which you will be receiving upon registration for the hackathon itself. Quickly moving through some of the scheduled events for this week, essentially, the upcoming sessions that we do have after today will be Introduction to Substrate, Introduction to Ink, and on Polkadot.js, where you can build the apps using Substrate Connect Lite clients as well. And this will be happening consecutively the next 3 days. At the same time, we are also introducing a second round of virtual networking and team formation that will take place on 2nd of June at 8 p.m. PST or 11 p.m. EDT, which is also happening on Gather Town. This information can actually be found on the Hackathon calendar, which you can save, and you can get access to save the calendar via the participants guide. But if not, the email that will be sent to you the moment you have registered for the hackathon. We do have ecosystem workshops happening all the way to 18th of June as well, starting tomorrow. And similarly, mental office hours that's going to happen as well. For this hackathon itself, we are also introducing a in-person meetup. It's called the Polkadot Hacker House, which will be happening on June 23rd to 28th in Brooklyn, New York City. If you have not already done so, you can actually grab your mobile phone and scan the QR code to register your interest today. Just to let you know that we do have limited number of seats at the Hacker House. So do register your interest ahead of time, which will get contacted with you to confirm your attendance in a week or two as we make all the arrangements for the Hacker House as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the time to Emre to touch on introduction to Polkadot. Emre, the stage is yours. I think you're on mute.
Classic. What's up, hackers? Thank you, Justin, for all that info. My name is Emre. I'll be sharing my screen with you to talk to you about Polkadot. What is it? Voila. All right. So this is an introduction to Polkadot. My name is Emre. I'm a technical educator at the Web3 Foundation. All right, yeah, let's just dive right in. So first, I'd like to tell you about the philosophy behind the Web3 Foundation. It's the belief in a decentralized and fair internet where the participants own their own data, identity, and therefore destiny. So all the protocols that Web3 Foundation, along with Parity, are building, which are like Polkadot, Kusama, the Substrate framework, these are all kind of based on this philosophy. Our founders are Dr. Gavin Wood, Robert, and Bjorn. Gavin is one of the co-founders of Ethereum and CTO of Ethereum back in the day before he started Polkadot, along with Robert and Bjorn. And they're all mostly hacking away. Bjorn is the communications officer, the chief communications officer. So this overview of Polkadot is this idea of an interoperability chain, this layer 0 foundational blockchain that are comprised of heterogeneous chains that connects together through the Polkadot ecosystem, and therefore take advantage of pooled security and interoperability. This is somewhat of a new paradigm, a new generation of blockchain. Before this type of architecture, blockchains were separate, kind of isolated networks that couldn't speak with one another, or they had to have kind of custom bridges. Polkadot is trying to create an ecosystem of these connected, heterogeneous, meaning they're not, they don't care about the main chain doesn't really care about the consensus mechanisms of the connected chains, as long as they are looking to connect to Polkadot and interoperate with other parachains. So we'll dig into what the parachains are. So why Polkadot? Why this layer 0 heterogeneous chain? Mainly the interoperability part is super important. Because of these isolated networks, bringing all those blockchains together, you're going to start to have an ecosystem of different types of blockchains that developers can build on top of. The pooled security is also a new paradigm. Before, you had to develop your own network that had to get to a certain network that had to get to a certain network threshold to be considered secure and usable. Pooled security allows for new ideas to be able to be developed quickly and connect to the Polkadot ecosystem, and therefore have the same security that an already developed network would have. So this is incredible for testing out new ideas. The heterogeneous chain idea is this: connected chains can have their own consensus mechanisms that they roll out based on their application needs. If you think about Ethereum, if you have an ERC20 token on Ethereum, you have to buy into Ethereum's design system and Ethereum's consensus mechanism. So, and even the throughput of Ethereum's nodes will affect your ERC20 smart contracts. Let's say that there's some NFT release on another, an NFT release that has nothing to do with your ERC20 smart contract. That throughput of the NFT release will therefore impact your smart contracts transaction fees. With the heterogeneous chain model, this sharding model, that is not kind of a problem to worry about. And one of the most important parts of Polkadot, this on-chain governance, giving the power of the token holders, giving the token holders the power of the decisions that are being made on how the runtimes get updated and how the code gets changed on that the functionality of the chain, how those runtime updates get changed, goes through an on-chain governance where the token holders can participate. Before this, it was kind of on the developers end of things. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, there's no on-chain governance that the code changes has to go through. So this is an incredibly powerful form of equitable token functionality. So these are kind of like the main driving points of Polkadot. The Polkadot architecture is quite complex and scalable. This relay chain, which is the central chain, the main chain you can think of, allows for different parachains to connect to it. The main chain blocks holds parachain information as well as the tokenomics of the token. So the validators of the relay chain are going to be validating blocks for the relay chain, and then the parachains can also have their own validators. These are called collators that are going to be interacting with the relay chain validators and therefore synchronizing the parachains with the relay chain. There can be different ways to connect to this relay chain. Parachains are the main format that we're seeing. There are also parathreads. If you don't have to be a whole blockchain for your application, parathread is not a per block basis connection. It's if you have something of more of a lighter application, a parathread may be a little bit more useful for you. Or bridges. So already existing blockchains could bridge to the Polkadot relay chain. They don't have to be a parachain or a pair thread. These are things like Bitcoin or any other type of, let's say, threshold cryptography chain that's being developed on the side that wants to take advantage of the ecosystem that Polkadot is enabling. So this communication, this interoperability part, is mainly allowed by the cross-consensus messaging format. So the XCM is a format of how the messages should be structured, and the rules of the messaging are defined in this protocol, in this format protocol. It's asynchronous, meaning that it's non-blocking. It's absolute, meaning that every single message will be delivered. It's asymmetric, meaning that messages that are delivered won't have, by default, some sort of a notification saying that the message has been delivered, unless that's a part of the functionality that you want, that you can code into your XCM implementation. And it's also agnostic about the consensus mechanism of the sender and the receiver. It doesn't really care about those type of things. The XCVM allows for further configuration of the XCM format in terms of modifying how you want to interact with XCM messages. If you have some sort of application-specific ways to handle messages, or if you have kind of more complex messages, you can use this virtual machine to program your XCM implementation further than just what we would get out of the box. XCMP, on the other hand, cross-chain message passing, is the actual messaging mechanism. So XCMP will not put messages on the relay chain, only a hash of the message on the inbound and the outbound queue. Current version of XCMP doesn't. Currently, the XCM version on Polkadot is version 2, and it does not have the XCMP implementation. There is HRMP, or what we call XCMP Lite, implemented right now. That is, we're seeing new channels open up for this type of communication, which is a little bit more computationally heavy as XCMP is being developed. HRMP is being used. It does directly put messages on the relay chain for now. So the HRMP will utilize the relay chain to send the messages from parachain to parachain. In the future, the XCMP implementation will allow for parachain to parachain message passing. So speaking of parachains, becoming a parachain, this is a really important part of the Polkadot architecture and kind of ideology. So parachains is a little bit of a different way. There's a barrier to entry for parachains to become a part of the relay chain. They have to go through an auctioning process. So every 2 weeks, a new slot opens up for parachains on the relay chain, and this is run as a candle auction. A candle auction is something that was developed a few centuries ago to create an auction where the ending period was not known to the people participating in the auction, meaning when the candle went out. This creates an environment where auctions don't have type of the sniping functionality, such as eBay auctions. And on top of that, after the ending period in Polkadot, the winner of the auction during the candle auction is decided retrospectively using a randomness function. So the winning parachain doesn't really know where it will win, in which block it will win. That's why this creates an incentive for parachains to bid as soon as possible, as much as possible, and as often as possible, creating kind of a more fair auction mechanism. The auctions require DOT to be locked up by the parachain teams. Those dots are not sent anywhere, but they remain in the account of the parachain teams. However, they will become non-transferable and non-stakeable. So the auctions are how parachain teams can become a part of the connected to the relay chain. However, they can increase their chances of winning the auction by running crowd loans. Crowd loans, in a way to think about it, is a immense improvement to, say, the 2017 ICO model. Crowd loans are a way for fundraising. Parachain teams can run crowd loans in conjunction to the auctions that they're trying to win, where supporters of the parachains could also lock up their DOT in support of the parachain, and then that crowd loan value can be used to win auction slots. The way that this makes it an immense improvement to the 2017 ICO model, where you would just pass your token off to some random address and hope that you see some sort of a interaction from the team that you sent your tokens to, with no guarantees of getting it back, is actually locked up inside of the relay chain. So the DOT that you use to participate in crowd loans to show support to parachain teams is locked in the relay chain and will actually get returned to you at the end of the auction slot. So those auction slots also have end dates. Parachain teams will continually have to win new slots when the lease periods are over. So this is incredible in a way that your support will get returned to you. Awesome. So parachain teams utilize this crowd loan functionality to win their slots. A common misconception also is that you have to be a parachain to run a project on Polkadot. This is only true. You must win a parachain slot. This is only true if you are a parachain or a parathread. Other projects that can run on parachains using parachain functionality, so using the existing parachains, you can develop applications or UIs, or if you want to have some sort of smart contract functionality, there are multiple options for you to use. One of the upcoming workshops is going to be on Ink, which is a smart contract format. There's also ways to interact with Ethereum virtual machine palette. So some parachains have the EVM palette, so you can run your Solidity smart contracts on the Polkadot ecosystem. And there's also WASM smart contracts as well. So there's multiple ways to interact with the Polkadot ecosystem. It's not, especially when it comes to doing smart contract development. However, one thing to remember is that Polkadot is not a smart contract platform. It's more of kind of an economy and ecosystem of blockchains. Okay, so building on Polkadot, this is kind of where it's getting important for you guys. You can do a bunch of different things, especially when you're thinking about your how you're going to be building your app at this hackathon. You can go from the parachain route. You could develop a parachain where you define your consensus model, how people can participate on your on-chain governance, what your token looks like. You could also do a pair thread where the lower barriers to entry for your application to the ecosystem. You can also build a independent chain that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of the parachain paradigm. It could just be a bridge to Polkadot. Or you could go towards the smart contract development route. You can have interact with one of the parachains that exist with the EVM palette, or use Ink to develop smart contracts. You could also be a few of the bounties, I believe, are just UIs on top of all of these things. You don't even have to use Substrate. So there's a lot of ways to interact with the platform, and there's a lot of need for all types of different things. So it's important to get creative. One of the most important parts of the Polkadot ecosystem is its Canary network, Kusama. Kusama is slowly becoming its own full-fledged network. In the beginning, it was developed as a place to test the game theoretic tokenomics in an environment that has real value. So it's a real value-bearing network where ideas first like to be ran before they are audited there and made sure that they work correctly before going on to Polkadot. Some teams are actually starting to choose just to stay on Kusama due to its culture, and it's a sped up environment. It's pretty much the same code as Polkadot. However, things happen faster on Kusama, so it's a little bit of a different environment. However, there's the KSM token that is its own economic environment. And there's also test networks, such as West End for Polkadot, where you can, or Rococo test network, which is going through a revamp. All of these things are there for you to develop applications around these ecosystems. So speaking of ecosystems, what is going on in the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems? So there's a bunch of chains that are participating in this in these ecosystems. There's a lot of APIs, a lot of tools and services that are being developed to make the development and interaction with this ecosystem easier. Bunch of production networks are being launched, especially, so these are on Polkadot. Parachains have been running for a little while now, and it's been a little over a month since XCM was released on Polkadot. So you're starting to see interoperability happen between these applications. And there's quite a bit of money flowing into the ecosystem. Not to mention that the Polkadot ecosystem is currently second to the Ethereum ecosystem in terms of developer count. So the ecosystem is growing quite rapidly. Lots of Substrate-based chains, and if you don't know what Substrate is, we'll talk about it. There is a workshop on it tomorrow that's going to go in depth, but I'll do a small high-level overview of it. A lot of DeFi, NFTs, gaming, smart contract development, identity, privacy, bridges, IoT. So all of these parachains are their own full-fledged networks that are running by connecting to either Polkadot or Kusama. What the coolest part is, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but the ability to start composing these apps to actually create decentralized applications. So these are just kind of like small parts of a larger application. You can think about it in a way. And you can start, creating really complex, useful applications just by seeing these parachains as rather than applications themselves as protocols for doing certain things for your application. There's quite a bit of APIs, tools, and services in the ecosystem that you can use during this hackathon to make your job easier, such as scanners, UIs, ways to, wallets. So these are things that exist, but also do remember that even though they exist, all of these things could also be improved. So just because there are a bunch of wallets out there shouldn't dissuade you from, making a better UI for a wallet. So also there's a bunch of programs around the ecosystem, such as the Substrate Builders program that directly supports your project. So also keep in mind that these projects that you're building are great starting points for taking it further to make them fully fledged applications or parachains or UIs. This hackathon is kind of like a jump starter for these. If you think you have a really good idea, post hackathon, there's a lot of programs for you to participate in and take your idea to the next step. So the Substrate Builders program, for example, has a few different tracks depending on the type of thing that you want to build. If you're building a parachain or something that's infrastructure related, or if it's just the application. Also, the Web3 Foundation has grants. Do remember that we're always looking for great ideas to fund through the grants program. There are different levels of grants depending on your application. You would have to go through a process for applying, and once you are done with the hackathon, based on what you have, you can draft up something to submit to the grants program to actually continue your idea. And then also there's the on-chain treasury, a form of funding that's fully on-chain. Your proposal goes through a governance process, and if the DOT token holders, the community sees your idea as something worthwhile for the on-chain funding, you can also go for funding through the treasury that's on-chain. There's also accelerators and incubators. If you think that you still need help with your project, there are bootcamp style learning programs. There are kind of, for example, Polkadot Basecamp, ran by Outlier Ventures, has a monthly meeting in which you could, start getting feedback on your ideas, getting more involved in the community, developing your idea further. Or the Polkadot DeFi Alliance Accelerator Program. These are the things that are quite available and are looking for great applications to be a part of them. So quick little high level overview over Substrate, because you can't have an intro to Polkadot unless you talk about the framework that it's built on. Substrate is a framework. Think about how React is a framework for building UIs. Substrate is a framework for building blockchains. It's taken a lot of the common parts of blockchains that, it's been over a decade now of blockchains being around, and turning them into modular parts that you can use kind of like Lego pieces to start developing your ideas. So these are called frame palettes, and they are modules that include specific parts of the blockchain functionality. You can include some, all, or a few, depending on what you're trying to do. You can also create your own palettes. If there's something that doesn't exist that you require for your application, there are, you can develop your own palette that has your own unique functionality. Substrate is built in a modular way that has on-chain governance as a core part of it. You can program your tokens using these palettes, and it has seamless integration with the Polkadot ecosystem. What's important about these Substrate, the Substrate framework is also one thing to think, for example, is how to, as a developer building on Substrate, you'll be thinking about how to develop your transaction fees, because transaction fees work differently in Substrate versus something like a smart contract platform. The runtime developer actually decides on the transaction fee by running benchmarks on the functionality of your blockchain. And those benchmarks are then deployed into the runtime. So you have a transaction fee that is a baseline. There are the ideas of tips to increase the importance of your transaction over the baseline fee limit. It has a bunch of benefits for longevity. If new kind of paradigms arise in the consensus world and you have a Substrate-based chain, your consensus mechanism is comprised of a few modular pieces that you can plug in and out. So if there is let's say a better finality mechanism that comes out, this architecture makes it really easy for you to be kind of future-proof in the way that you develop your blockchain. So it's like kind of a whole new paradigm of developing blockchains. It's extremely scalable. Transaction fees, when we talk about transaction fees, the main question ends up becoming, what type of transaction? If it's just a financial transaction, capabilities go anywhere from like 1,500 transactions to some very high numbers that off the top of my head, I don't remember, but in theory exist. Substrate enables kind of the sharding where you can spin up new instances horizontally. So the scalability of it is quite thought out and thorough. And it's also written in Rust, which is a systems level language that has, I guess, you can think about it as it's performant as, let's say, C, but also gives you control over its memory management, something like Java. It has a beautiful developer ecosystem and has been kind of steadily on the rise to be one of the, if not the top development programming language since, I think, 2016. So combined with that, the runtime for substrate-based chains compile into WASM, so WebAssembly, meaning that you can run this runtime on any type of machine. So essentially, all of these things allow you to have a scalable, future-proof blockchain ecosystem in which your portions of your chain are modularized and interchangeable and upgradable. So because these runtime upgrades are just these WASM binaries, this idea of runtime upgrades being forkless is a part of Substrate. So forkless upgrades are extremely important because your runtime upgrades will be going through a on-chain governance, and the on-chain governance proposal will have the runtime upgrade in as a WASM blob. And if it passes on-chain governance, that runtime will be included in one of the upcoming blocks. And as soon as that block is added to the canonical chain, the runtime will be upgraded. There's no more messy forks happening. So this is extremely powerful. And you can also, customize the governance process for your runtime upgrades because the governance is just a collection of palettes as well. Again, Substrate is resilient and robust, meaning that especially due to some of the functionalities of Rust and how it handles errors, and the consensus mechanism can be replaced as new things come along. It's again kind of this future-proof way of doing things. It's not just a out of the box, this is the design and this is what you have to buy into. It's extremely interchangeable and customizable. So Substrate has that kind of rich ecosystem, APIs, tools, everything that you can use to deploy, monitor your applications. Awesome. So with that being said, I want to kind of switch back to the stop sharing my screen and answer any questions that we have. Let's see here. I see Igor has a question. What ecosystem team is best to choose for kinda DEX video streaming solution with incentives for watching? So it sounds like you're trying to build a decentralized exchange for video streaming solution. Yeah, I think you will have to clarify that question. I'm not sure I understand. What are some examples of projects you could build with Substrate for this hackathon? Yeah, so anything from a Parachain to a standalone blockchain that's going to bridge to Ethereum, to Polkadot, can be built. Again, look at the hackathon guidelines for especially like the bounties and what they're looking for in order to make sure that you can kind of create a box around your idea so that you don't get too overwhelmed. I think that's probably going to be really important for everyone here. These are large scale ideas, and this is a hackathon that's you know, a finite short amount. Do your best to try and create reasonable, achievable goals. And again, you know, your idea doesn't have to be running on production by the end of the hackathon. This hackathon is a way to kind of kickstart the idea, get something that's maybe a proof of concept or a most viable product, basic working model. And then you have all of these programs and education kind of avenues that you can go post hackathon. Yeah, this stream will be available to watch after it ends on the YouTube page and in this link as well, the same link that you're on, I believe. What happens if you start building dApps on layer 1 that won a parachain and it loses the next round of parachain auction? By default, they won't be kicked off the system. By default, parachains are already para threads, so they will still be a part of the ecosystem, and they can try to win another upcoming parachain auction. Most parachain slots on Polkadot are around 2 years, so this is going to be interesting to see. But also, I would like to implore you to think about it in a way that useful parachains that have proven themselves to their community and to the ecosystem as useful will likely easily win parachain slots. And it's usually they will start participating in auctions before their slot ending period is over. So they will kind of look to win auctions ahead of time. Left side bottom slide is not fully visible. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure which slide that was, but I will look back at the presentation later. Is it possible to push PR for different projects and bounties during this hackathon? Again, I think look at the hackathon guidelines, but I don't see why not. But don't quote me on that. Can a development team build an application and use multiple parachain backends without owning a parachain? For example, using Akala for the exchange and Kilt for identification without being a parachain owner themselves. Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly the definition of composing different parachains to develop decentralized applications. Ways to interact with Akala and Kilt might be different. So RPC calls, or depending on if they have their own APIs for their own on-chain data, you might just use those or the Polkadot.js API, which is used, which has you can use as a data layer for your application. In theory, you could just develop a JavaScript front end that uses the Polkadot.js API to do something useful for the ecosystem. These are all within not legal grounds, but expected kind of ways to interact in this hackathon. Can we communicate from a public parachain to a private parachain using XCM? Good question. So XCM doesn't care about if the parachain is public or private. It's just a message format. So the way that the message will be structured, as long as those parachains have implemented XCM into their runtime, then yes, that's possible. All right. I'm also looking for more questions in the chat. Could we have the slides? Yeah, I will try to see what the best way to provide these slides would be. So stay tuned. If you an answer, Haisam is asking, if you an answer, is there a support for Kilt in Polkadot to integrate with? So I would check the Kilt documentation. I'm sure you can use the Polkadot.js API to get some Kilt data to your app to develop something. Unless Kilt has their own way of interacting, or maybe they have like their own data layer that you could use. Obviously, like a big part of hackathons is reading a lot of documentation, and what you'll see is each Parachain team has different levels of documentation. So the first couple of days are probably really important to make sure you choose projects that have what you need to deliver your idea. This would mean, documentation, some way to interact with that Parachain's data. I would personally always see what I can do with the Polkadot.js suites. So the API, the extension. There's also boilerplate code for running Substrate front end and Node. I believe this will be kind of talked about in detail tomorrow at the Substrate Intro to Substrate workshop. So, there's some code out there that's already usable to start spinning up a Substrate node, where you can just start pulling in palettes and start messing around with the runtimes. That is if that's what you want to do. Yeah. And also, if you're in New York, there will be a team of us there to help you out in person. Would love to meet any of you, so come say hi and show us your idea, and we will mentor you and make sure that you're being given the right information.
There we go. How are we doing with questions, Emre?
I believe we are done with all the questions.
So Alex is asking where in New York. That would be in Brooklyn. It's called Industry City. And Emre, you were actually the only person that I know that has visited the site. So should we be excited about it?
The site is amazing. It's has a beautiful view of the city. It's kind of like this one big loft, so it's going to be couches and tables where you can interact with each other. And it's a part of this really cool complex. It's kind of like this up and coming part of Brooklyn. So
awesome. Yeah. The point of the Hacker House is what exactly Emre mentioned, to basically get people together to hack together, to learn together. There's going to be workshops, stuff like similar to what Emre delivered, similar to what we've got planned for the next couple of weeks as well, but potentially with a different focus and so on. But really the idea is to get FaceTime with people, right? So that we actually get to interact with each other and get to know each other. So I think I see one more question. I was wondering what the max speed is currently for parachains, and is there a limit speed for TPS in the future for parachains? This is for you.
Good question. So transaction per second depends on a chain like Polkadot. Not each transaction is not equal. So because there are function calls involved that are called extrinsics, the transaction per second would be different for different types of transactions. There have been certain numbers floating out there that Polkadot's architecture can support up to kind of like 100,000 transactions per second. We're definitely not there. However, you know, anywhere from like 800 to 1,500 transactions per second could be, you know, like a good window that you can think about when you're developing with Substrate.
Cool, awesome, thank you. I did actually not know that, so it's awesome. Maybe one thing that I wanted to mention as I was listening into Emre's presentation, Emre, you spoke a lot about you know, Polkadot, the architecture, and obviously a lot of Substrate comes in, and Rust development, and so on. Oh, there's an echo. All right, so you should hear me.
You're on mute now. You're on mute, Urban.
I'm so curious about what he was saying.
I think he said something along the lines of, I know, hang on.
Oh, yeah. No, I was saying before that, I wonder what he was about to say.
Yeah. But while probably Urban gets to find his mute button, I think it's just kind of emphasize again, basically the Hacker House. Essentially, it's in-person meetup where we'll like to meet you know, folks who are actually building for the hackathon to actually be in person. The objective here is really that, you know, we do have a couple of mentors who will be on site to help you along in this 6 days of you know, partial hacking. And we do have lined up some workshops and networking to kind of get people together. And the really objective here is really to break through, you know, all this virtual fatigue that we kind of face as, you know, for the past 2.5 years as well. You know, it's really exciting for the team at Polkadot to really meet every one of you. We do have ecosystem teams. They are going to be there as well, similarly to guide you along whatever that you're building, you know, or that you're kind of building at the same time as well. You know, for folks who are still kind of not yet registered, probably just take this opportunity to kind of fill time and kind of call for registration for the hackathon. Essentially, this registration will be an entry ticket for lots of things that has been lined up and prepared for participants of the hackathon. Of course, to qualify for the prizes, but more essentially, there is actually a curated list of documentations that is prepared in the participants guide that has been readily prepared for all the participants at the hackathon. Essentially, anything from who your mentors are, a mentor booking form to secure your slots with the mentors that have availed their time, all the way to any documentations with regards to the Polkadot Kusama ecosystem and Substrate itself, and essentially any other information about the hackathon, from, you know, even submission criteria, artifacts, and all are just going to be up there as well. But I think on top of that, the next two important steps will really be to join the Polkadot Discord server. There is a hackathon channel where announcements will be made. Folks who are actually finding teams will be able to make introductions and find people that you want in your team as part of the team formation process. Similarly, all the mentors are going to be on the Discord server as well, where you can ask your questions. And last but not least, a hackathon calendar has actually been prepared. Essentially, we have lined up lots of workshops, lots of mentor office hours, and hackathon calendar will be the best way for you to ensure that you don't miss out any of the sessions. And knowing who is actually available for the mentor office hours as well. Quick recap, this is going to be 6 weeks long. As Emre just mentioned earlier on, essentially this week will really be about looking at and ideating what you would like to build for the hackathon. While we have 5 main categories that you can select for submissions, you can also take a look at the ecosystem teams challenges that various teams have put out for bounties, where you can look at to integrate. The idea here is really not to limit what you can build, but rather to explore the possibilities that's out there. It could be something that's completely new, or it can be something that you kind of want to improve on and make it even better as it is based on the various categories that we have up in line as well. So just a quick recap on what has been lined up, more specifically for this week. Tomorrow, we do have a session on introduction to Substrate, of which we will dive in a lot deeper about what Substrate is about, followed by an introduction to Ink, and a session that's going to talk a little bit more about Polkadot.js. Other than that, for those who have missed out a virtual networking session that took place yesterday, we have a second run of it that's going to happen on 2nd of June, 8 p.m. PST or 11 p.m. EDT, whichever you're based at. This will be the time. More information will also be found on the hackathon calendar as well, and the access link and everything will all be made available accordingly. Last but not least, just the rest of the sessions that's going to take place throughout the hackathon process. Do take note of them, and we will just kind of see you accordingly as well. Lastly, we Urban and team have actually prepared a curated modules that essentially will help you get started also on the Polkadot ecosystem. Part of the things that Emre have actually covered will also be covered in the Polkadot pathway modules that has been curated for the North America edition. Over here, it's just an opportunity for you to understand on a deeper level what Polkadot system ecosystem would be in kind of like a step-by-step modules that has been prepared. You can also rack up points where top 100 scorers towards the end of the hackathon will kind of get yourself a Polkadot swag tee. If you have not already known, Polkadot have rebranded a while back. So in terms of these design and all, they did kind of have a refresh. So for those who would like to kind of have a collection of Polkadot swag t-shirt, this is also an opportunity for you to do so. So if you have not already created an account, or if you already have, this QR code essentially will bring you to the North American edition modules that's actually made readily available for every one of you. So not too sure if Urban will come back on, but essentially 2 main people that you can reach out to. My name is Justin, and this is my email and my Discord ID, and you can reach out to Urban similarly as well if you have any questions with regards to the hackathon. Of course, if there are more ecosystem related questions, you can actually go to the ecosystem technical channel that is on the Polkadot Discord server as well. And you can reach out to the relevant parties, especially if you're kind of exploring how integrations can kind of work by using some of the parachains, for example, or any of the bounties that's been set up for the ecosystem teams as well. So probably just an opportunity for Emre for any last words, but also for Urban to kind of chime in if he has something to kind of wrap up as well. Emre, any last words before we end the session?
Yeah, so good luck everyone. I will, like I said, I'll be in New York. If not, you can find me on Matrix, or here's my Twitter handle. If you have any ideas that you want to run by me, happy to help. And yeah, very excited to see the final results of your projects.
Thank you. So as most of the questions have asked, this session will also be made available after we have ended on this Crowdcast link that you are watching the live stream. But if not, you'd like to visit it another day, you can go by AngelHack's or Polkadot's YouTube channel. We do post the recording of today's session as well for you to revisit any of the content, more specifically shared by Emre in today's introduction to Polkadot as well. Other than that, thank you, everyone. Happy hacking, and we'll see you in tomorrow's session. Bye-bye.
Bye.